Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. This video is probably 2 years late, but people are still starting remotely in their new jobs in publishing like I did technically on my first day. So I just thought I would give a video about like tips and advice starting remotely. I've also spoken to a couple of people that did start their jobs completely remotely when we were in the middle of the pandemic. I have now just started my new job and I have been doing 2 days in the office and 3 days at home, so technically I started remotely as well and have been having to kind of like juggle using Teams rather than just talking to the person next to me. But I thought that this video might help some people, advice what you should and shouldn't do, and maybe what companies could be doing to help people starting remotely as well. The pandemic is not over yet, there are still cases and stuff, so people aren't going back into the offices full time at the moment. So if you are starting your job remotely, then massive good luck to you. If you have any particular questions, then leave them in the comment section down below. I hope you find this useful. For me, it definitely helped just ask loads of questions on Teams. It felt like I was being so annoying, typing more and more questions, but at the end of the day, that's how I'm gonna learn. And I feel like sometimes I was given a task and would sit there for ages trying to figure it out, and actually if I just dropped someone a message and got them to call, then I'd probably figure it out a lot easier than just kind of like suffering in silence on my own. So my main thing would just be to like ask questions and reach out to people. Don't be afraid of like making like spontaneous calls as well, which I did a couple of times to people in my team, just to be like, hi, can we just run through this? It'll be easier on a call. And like screen sharing. Being in the office, like comparatively, it's so much better for learning. If you can join any like meetings virtually as well, I would definitely recommend that. Even if you just have your camera off, your microphone off, and you're just sitting listening, it can just help with that kind of like learning process of how the publishing process works at where you're working. So, you obviously started your job remotely. Can you take us back to the beginning before you got a job in publishing? What were you doing before that?
So I was working in a PR and comms internship for a little while. I thought I was being unsuccessful in my publishing job hunt, so I thought the best thing for me to do was go do something else so I could get some transferable skills.
Perfect, yeah. And then when did you join the publishing industry then?
I joined in November 2020, so midway through what was the second national lockdown here. And so that was nice and exciting. It was just after my birthday. That was the only happy thing that happened in November apart from the publishing job.
And so how were those sort of like initial stages? Obviously, presumably you knew that it was going to start remotely because we were in the middle of said pandemic. So how were those initial stages for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think going into the job, I knew it would be remote, like you said, and I just finished doing a remote internship as well. So I feel like a lot of me was definitely prepared for that. But what made it a little bit more scary was knowing it was a job that I cared a lot about, and I was going in remotely, and I was worried about not being able to trail someone on your first day, which is always a great thing to happen on your first day. Everyone was there from the get-go to help me set up. I had members of Hay House emailing me on my personal email address, resources for me to use when I started. So I felt like I wasn't being thrown in at the deep end. At least I had some sort of armbands, basically.
Did you have any nightmares with, starting any new job, I feel like there's always some kind of tech issues or anything. Did you have anything in your first week that was an absolute nightmare?
Nothing like absolute nightmare, but I couldn't connect to the server to get some files for the first few days, and it just kept throwing error after error, and my Wi-Fi in my old place was notoriously bad as well. So the first time I tried to say something in a meeting that wasn't just like a cache up, and the internet went down and no one could hear me. So that was a nice first omen for my first week.
And then besides that, how were like the team with obviously you said you felt supported. Do you feel like it would have been different starting remotely compared to being in the office where you could sort of just turn to someone and ask them questions? Oh
yeah, for sure. That was the biggest thing I missed. Nothing quite compares to typing out an email and having a question and being able to turn around and be like, help me. I am super lucky that my manager also started remotely, and she understood where I was coming from. And I think it's really important just to ask for help, because now we're, well over a year and a half into the pandemic, the likelihood is there's someone either at your level or senior to you that started remotely, and it's definitely best just to reach out and be like, hey, are you feeling this as well? Or hey, can you just help? It
takes a certain amount of courage to kind of be proactive and send someone a message, because you're obviously physically having to do that click send, as opposed to just talking to someone. Do you have any advice for someone that might be particularly reserved or a little bit more shy that doesn't feel comfortable doing that? Do you just think, just do it, just push yourself out of your comfort zone and do it?
Totally, just push yourself out of your comfort zone, but also I understand how difficult it is to make that initial move sometimes. I am quite the overthinker as well, so it's hard for me to reach out. And my best advice would be, don't overthink someone's tone in a message, a Slack message or an email, because more often than not, the full stop that's there does not mean that they're angry with you. It's just because they're probably using proper grammar, which is really easy to read into, but try and do it if you can.
What importance do you think that has, the kind of tone of voice, having a call with someone opposed to just messages or emails or something? Do you find that it's more helpful when you have calls with people?
Personally, yeah. Not just because of the being able to actually interpret what they mean a lot easier by their tone of voice, and also you can read their body language, see their facial expressions, but also it allows for you to tag along questions you didn't know you were going to have. It's a bit more of a effort to send an extra email when you have a question, 5 minutes later. When you're on a call, those questions freely flow, and coming from a marketing department, a lot of my queries and questions are relatively creative, and being able to speak to someone on a call about that, your creativity just, transpires differently and better over a call than it does over a Slack message.
And what advice would you give to people that have started having their first few meetings, having started their job remotely?
What I did in my first big meetings when I had the cross-departmental ones was take a couple of notes each time, so you can kind of look back on them. If there's recurring themes or conversations, you can almost refer back to your notes and prepare for that. Definitely do try and speak. As much as I just complained about the annoyance of Zoom lag, it's definitely worth it. 9 times out of 10, everyone's going to make space for you to speak, especially if you're starting as well. Everyone wants to hear your voice. You've been hired for a reason. Even if it's just something as small as saying you agree with someone, it's important you try and get yourself out there, try and get your voice heard.
And following on from that, what do you think the other employees could be doing as well to support the new starters that have started remotely?
There's a whole range of what people could do, ranging from something super simple as a Slack message or a Teams message or an email on their first day, just to show that people are aware that they're coming and they're welcome. And even, scheduling a coffee break, which I had quite a few on my first week, some Zoom coffee breaks and some members of the team where everyone gave me a rundown of what they did, and I think that's really important to get a mental grasp of what everyone's doing in the company, get a little bit of a mind map going on. I think if you know that someone's starting remotely and you've also started remotely, when you reach out to them, like I've done it at Hay House and been like, look, I started remotely. If you ever want to speak to someone just about the pains of starting remote working, just let me know. I think just reaching out, making them know that you're there.
Yeah, and it's really nice that you said, obviously, that you're reaching out to people, because you can be like, look, I was literally in your situation before and I've survived. And then finally, do you have any kind of like last minute advice for people that are starting their job remotely and you think this is what you need to on your first week, on your first month, before they start even?
Before you start, I actually ended up watching some just general marketing seminars, not even about books. I just wanted to give myself this extra skill set, and also I wanted some talking points that I could maybe bring up with the rest of my team if I was doing a catch up. I wanted to be able to talk. I wanted to impress, basically. It's your first day. I'm sure many people want to do the same thing. Also, like I said earlier, just reach out, even if it's just to be like, hey, how are you? Everyone is there to support you, even if you don't think they are and you think, they're too high up the chain for me to speak to. Everybody wants you there. Everyone is there to support you. So absolutely, just reach out, say hi, and don't be afraid of making friends with random people in random departments.
So then when you joined, how was that? So obviously you knew it was going to be remote because we were in the middle of the pandemic and you knew all about that. You knew you'd have to be logging onto a laptop on your first day rather than going to an office. How were those kind of initial stages of getting you all set up and your first week, etc.?
It was better than I expected, I think, because everyone was very aware of the fact I was starting remote, and they were very aware of how everything can go very wrong if you're not there with IT. But it was scary, and I felt a lot of pressure making sure that my camera was facing something that looked professional and making sure that I looked really on it every day. Just because I was really worried that people would think, I was just a slob in my bedroom.
Yeah, so you're saying about learning from other people, and I think that's copying other people is how you learn a lot of the time. Do you think that still applies even when you're starting remotely, that you had to kind of learn from copying other people? Or is it harder because you couldn't see them?
I think it's harder. There was a certain element of sharing screens and learning that way, but it is a lot easier to learn when you're in an office surrounded by people talking about the job, and not having that really made it harder for me to learn things. I think you don't really think about it when you're in an office, you just talk, but it feels a lot more intrusive to message people and to constantly be sending messages and asking questions. So I think it did take me a while to get over that. So once I was over that, it became a lot easier.
And do you think that was a big part of it, like just dropping someone an email or a Teams message to ask them a question?
Yeah, I think because in publishing, you'll know, there's so many niche terms, acronyms, all sorts of things that you just wouldn't know if you didn't ask. And when these things pop up, I initially was so scared of asking because I thought I should know these. Like, everyone's going to think I'm really daft. Everyone's going to think that it's a really stupid question, but everyone has to start somewhere. So once that kind of clicked in my head, it wasn't too bad. I got used to it faster than I thought. It was a lot better than I expected. I was expecting it to be very lonely and to just be sat by myself, not talking to anyone all day. So it was really nice to come into it and have pretty regular team meetings and to have teams where we could just chat fine, but I didn't kind of have the confidence to talk. So once I got over that, it was a lot better, but initially it was a bit lonely, yeah.
So do you think, looking back, you would change that to try and get involved more? Is there anything else that you would change looking back now? If someone was starting remotely, what advice would you give to them?
I would definitely have talked more, because as soon as I started to get to know people, it became so much easier. So yeah, definitely talking more, definitely asking more questions from the get-go, not being scared to ask for help. I feel like that's the same for in-person training as well. As soon as I realised that everyone had the same issues that I did, everyone struggled to learn how to use all the spreadsheets and how to use Biblio and all of the publishing software, I wasn't as worried asking questions. So asking questions is key.
And then what about sort of on the flip side, what do you think the other people in the team and in the business could be doing to support someone that's starting remotely?
I think they can make it clear that you can ask questions and being friendly. What I thought was really lovely when I started at Bloomsbury was people had already emailed me before my actual start date. So when I started, I opened up my emails and there was emails from all the people in my team saying, "Welcome to Bloomsbury, let me know if you need anything, always happy to have a chat." So that made me feel really welcome, and that was absolutely lovely. I think starting remote is scary. It's really, really scary, and you're going to be very nervous about talking to all of these people that you're not going to meet in person, but lots of people have done it, and I think just making sure that you communicate and you know that everyone is very, very happy to have you there, and they're not going to judge you for what you're asking or what you can and can't do. Don't worry, and you'll get used to it quicker than you realise.
I mean, be as honest as you like, did you feel supported? Did you feel that you were quite distant from everyone? Is it different to how you expected?
It was and it wasn't, because my previous role that I was in for a year was work remote. So I had experience working from home, and I kind of sort of predicted what it would be like. Obviously, it's different with every company. But yeah, so I had kind of the confidence to do that, and kind of the awareness that I was going to have to learn how to do my job and interact with people completely through a screen.
How did you find that kind of communication? Because obviously when you're in the office, you can just turn to the person next to you, ask them a question. Did you feel that that was slightly different because you'd have to message them on Teams or call them or email, or what was that like?
At the very, very beginning, I felt a little bit apprehensive just messaging people on Teams and being like, "Hey, I need this thing from you, is that okay?" But everyone was really, really nice about it, and I did feel supported, and I felt like my confidence grew. I didn't even really take that long for that to happen, so I really appreciated that. It helped that we were doing other social things alongside. We were having conversations. It wasn't just about work, and so when it did come down to work questions that I needed answered, people felt a little bit more approachable.
Moving on from that, so how important do you think those kind of social things are when you're starting a job remotely for the very first time? Do you think that it makes much of a difference?
Oh, I think it makes a lot of difference. And so I think that that's a big element of making work feel like a workplace, even though I'm just, sat in my front room. Yeah, I think it's pretty integral to it. But the advice that I would give, I think, is just ask for any and every resource and study whatever you can. Learning more the way that you put that definition back in your job, and the way that you plug into your job and feel that confidence, and getting involved. Totally get involved. Anything, get involved, especially if it's social, because it makes that workplace feel like a workplace. It's important to just realize that it's challenging. Information is your friend. So making those resources available for one. I guess also what helped me was just having a lot of people checking in. At first it was a little bit I was a bit kind of just taken aback by it, I don't really know who you are, but I'm supposed to tell you how I'm doing with this or that thing. But yeah, I think ultimately it helped because I felt supported, and I felt like I had multiple people I could ask if I had a question. So if I had a question I didn't really know who to ask, I would just kind of think about it for a second and then choose somebody and say, I don't really know who to go to with this. Can you point me in the right direction? And having those connections in the first place was important for me to be able to do that. Otherwise, I would have probably just sat there and tried to figure it out on my own. More and more people are starting remotely. It's not a brand new thing anymore. So it doesn't have to be scary, because companies are actually doing the work to be that support system. Yeah, it feels strange, and it will probably continue to feel strange for a while, because it's just not, it doesn't come naturally. But yeah, don't be afraid of it.